This is a brief talk about giving meaningful feedback, its importance, what it is, and how we can do it, and how to do it as well. On in the future for the rest of the semester, I'm going to be asking you to provide meaningful feedback, not just feedback, but meaningful feedback to each other and eventually to me as well. And this is excellent practice because you're going to have to do this for students as well in the future, and it's something you'll be learning about more in the as your academic careers go on. But also, it's a good practice skill to start practicing. So let's get in. So what is it? So feedback to students can take on many different forms. This can be simple suggestions, edits on their writing, comments on final submissions. The grades is a fine kind of feedback as well. Just comments on oral presentations. So to help students make the most productive use of feedback, we need to think about the timing of the assignments and where it is in the semester, in the course schedule. And we'll need to also bear in mind the tone of our feedback and how to give feedback so the students can benefit the most from the comments. That's the important thing. The comments for students, or for anyone for that matter, are meant to help them be better for next time, so they know what they're doing well and what they're not doing so well, and where they're strong and where they're a bit weaker. So this is why it's important to give meaningful, helpful feedback, and so that people can improve. If they don't know what they did right or wrong, how can they get better? They might be exercising or working on wrong parts of their skills, or they might be strengthening weaknesses, strengthening unhealthy skills. To provide a bit of context, when I first started teaching, I taught at a middle school in Seoul, and for the first semester, I had very bad feedback. What that means was the feedback I got was always good job, good job, good job, good job, good job. And that meant nothing. I wasn't doing a good job. I was having a very hard time, but there was no feedback for it, and everything, there was no help. And some people say, well, it's not their job. It's other teachers are busy. But when you're the head teacher of a department, it is your job. And that was who was giving the feedback, and he was, useless as that in that regard. So when we say talk about giving feedback, it's there to help you get better and to help make a stronger product. So providing meaningful feedback helps students move beyond focusing just on grades. This goes back to my philosophy on grading. If a student scores 100 out of 100, they're perfect. How can they be better? And this is a problem I have with grade inflation, in that it is an inaccurate means of giving feedback. If you get a 90 on your assignment, you might think, wow, that's great. I did everything perfect. But probably not. And even then, maybe with how grade curves can happen, is that you might have done very well, but the curve required by the school or university means that you got a C on it instead of what would have otherwise been an A. This is where feedback actually comes in much better. And so, also, one person's 95 is a different person's 95, especially when we're talking about different teachers, different evaluators. So providing feedback provides personalized evaluation, specific information on their performance and their learning. So also feedback should be what we call constructive, positive reinforcement. We want to encourage the good and try to make them build up their skills. I want you to build up your presentation skills, your English skills, your teaching skills. And so, just saying, for example, this is bad and you should feel bad, that's not helpful feedback. Because how was it bad? Well, if I go into details about what parts are weak and what parts you can work on, that helps you get better for next time. And so when I provide you with feedback on your assignments, on your projects, it's going to be a bit more in depth. And I hope you take the time to read it, if I'm taking the time to write it especially, and not just looking at the number grade, the letter grade, so to speak. It also helps to make our feedback as specific as possible. We need to avoid generalities, even if it's real easy to do them, especially when we're grading a lot of assignments, a lot of projects. So just saying, nice work, or unclear, or huh, or wow, that doesn't help the student understand what they did correct, what was so good about it. So it also can create a feeling that the evaluator, the teacher, didn't really read it or take a close look at it, which, if you spend hours preparing something, hours making something, then you want the person to look at it to spend some time and actually look at it. So I've had that with my academic career, but I've also been on the other side when, I haven't scheduled the assignments correctly or as efficiently as I could have, and I have 100 lessons to evaluate in 3 days, and you're just like, oh, you start. Generalities save time, but they don't provide helpful feedback to students. Meaningful feedback is also formative. It helps students and teachers and everyone understand the learning progress and focus on improvement. In your writing classes, hopefully the instructor is able to take time and see your first draft, second draft, third draft, so they can help provide you feedback and get better before the final assignment is due. And this is also something that's a bit difficult this semester, but we're going to try it out a bit later. But when we were in class together, I could walk around and see how you're doing, what you're talking about, and provide immediate feedback on your ideas or directions that you're going with, and the ideas that you had, and what I thought was workable and a good idea, and what was maybe not a good idea. So even if so, there's mid-progress feedback. Then of course there's feedback on the final project, the summative assignment, such as final essays and tests. So the feedback provided then, even if the test is over, the feedback you give should be able to be carried on in the future. What they learn here, that you should be able to take with you next time. It's something to bear in mind of how, if you or the student makes a mistake, what was the mistake? And providing feedback, try to help the student identify what the mistake is, what they did wrong, and help them avoid that same mistake in the future, what they can do. This one I have a problem with. To be helpful, feedback needs to be timely. As in, this is very true with adults as well. It's most effective if we get feedback on our projects, on our work, earlier rather than later. It's something we need to bear in mind while it's still fresh. So you submitted your video lessons in the past couple of weeks, and I need to give you your feedback soon. So this weekend, as of the time of this recording, that's what I'm going to do. And usually there's no hard set thing about this, but within 3 weeks of the student giving the assignment, you need to have feedback ready for them. But if they're younger students, then by nature their projects will be a bit less complicated, so that will be easier. But if you're talking 5-page essays or 10-page essays, then it takes time to read, and adults also need to understand that. Okay. This one, if we're talking about handwritten feedback, which we don't have now with this semester, but in the past you have had, it needs to be legible. The student needs to be able to read what we're saying, but also it needs to use constructive tone. We need to use students should be able to read and understand the feedback, but it also needs to be building them up. If something is too negative, we often get defensive or we ignore it. So if we use constructive language to help the student try to get better, then they might actually take heed of the advice. Back when I was teaching elementary school, I got to read and grade students' journals, and at first I was working very hard. I was fixing spellings, and I was fixing grammar and writing comments, but a lot of students, most students, never actually corrected their spelling. They never did. One girl, very nice girl, she spelled my name, John, John. She's always spelled it Jhon. And every time, because she wrote her journals like letters to me, she said, "Dear John teacher." She's very nice. She always spelled it Jhon. And every time, every week, I corrected her spelling John. She never, not once, spelled my name correctly. So much so, I thought she meant to, but she didn't. She just did not pay attention to the correction. She wasn't listening to the feedback. And so that's something that students do. That happens. It absolutely happens. And it doesn't feel good to spend time to provide corrections, and those corrections are ignored for whatever reasons. So it's something that we need to be aware of. So we need to be aware of how we're giving the feedback, and also think about, even if you write something down, would you have talked to that person the same way as you write it? Sometimes we use much briefer language, fewer words in our written evaluations, our written feedback, than in our spoken feedback. And that can come off in very overly direct, overly confrontational, overly scolding, which sometimes adults don't respond to. So, giving feedback, think of it as you're starting a conversation, and this is a one-way transmission from you to the students. But another thing that we're going to do as well is self-reflection, self-evaluations. How did you do? What was good? What was bad? And this is very helpful in getting students and workers to think about their own work. Instead of, it's good to be able to think after assignment, what was easy, what was difficult, what did you enjoy doing, what did you not enjoy doing, and how can you improve for the future? These are all helpful for us. So when we talk about giving helpful feedback, we need to be specific to our students about what they did right and what you enjoyed. But when we give constructive feedback, we also need to build them up. That's the job of a teacher, is to build up students from foundations and build their knowledge and skills up. We don't need to tear down. That's somebody else's job. Something that we have some confusion with sometimes. Feedback is not the same as just rewriting their essay or providing lots of edits. We're there to evaluate. We're not editors. Editor is a paid position in order to fix someone's writing. A copy editor is there to fix spelling and typos. It's an actual job that newspapers and book companies used to have. They don't have anymore. It's a problem. So when we give feedback, it helps if we explain what the problems are, what problems they have in their writing or their speaking, identify the problems, and then how the student can work to fix them. Don't just fix the problem with the red pen. because then the student isn't learning and maybe they're not understanding that what they're doing is a problem, that it's incorrect, and that it's a fixable problem. Yeah. Then, of course, it helps, as always, to tailor, to customize our feedback for the assignment. If it's a video lesson, then evaluating the student's writing is less important than their speaking. And think about if something's a creative effort versus a rote memorization test, then perhaps there's we can be flexible in how we give feedback. So it's something that we need to bear in mind about what kind of feedback we give based on what kind of work is being done. So with your video lessons that you just had, it's something that feedback, I'm going to be providing a lot more feedback on your on-camera personas, your demeanor, how you act on camera. And this is something that would not come out through a written lesson plan by itself, because I can't evaluate that. So that's something for that. All right. Also, this is quite helpful if you have a long-term class. If you notice patterns in the kind of feedback you're giving, if you see more than one, not just more than one, if you see a third or a third of the students or half the students you're giving the same feedback, they have the same points of weakness, then that tells us, the teacher, that there's a group problem, that they are misunderstanding or not understanding, or they have no introduction to an idea that they should or that you should have introduced to them before. So it's something helpful to use the feedback to inform your future lessons. If there's something that you see a common problem with your students' work, then you need to fix that, or try to fix it as best we can in future lessons. You can address that, and that's part of the organic nature of teaching. Not all students are the same. Classes have their own personalities, students have their own personalities, and not everyone shows up knowing the same things. And we don't, just looking at a student, we don't know that. Through feedback, we can figure it out. And also, this is a pitfall, so to speak. This is for you. You can't spend too much time providing feedback for students. Otherwise, you don't have time for other things. And you have a lot of other things to do. You have to prepare other lessons. You have to have meetings and all those wonderful things. And you have to have a life as well. So you'll need to make guidelines for yourself on how you will provide feedback. Are you going to write a one-page essay like Evergreen State University? That's how they provide feedback. There's no grades at that school, but for every semester, every student, the professor writes a short essay. Oh my goodness, a short essay about their performance in the class, and that's really nice. But it's hard if that student wants to go to a different school. So it's something. Then also something that is important, we need to try to be fair. It's not fair to spend 2 hours on one student's work and then 1 minute on another student's. That's not fair to the student and to either student, really. So you might need to make a cap on what's the maximum number of suggestions or areas that you can give advice on. It might be 5 or 7 or just 2, depending on the number of students and the number of assignments that you need to grade. This one I had problems with. If you have multiple classes and the classes are doing similar or the same assignments, then you need to stagger your due dates to give you enough time to, realistically provide feedback and evaluation for your students' work. This is because you need to provide quality feedback. And it's much easier to think of it if you need to provide quality feedback for 30 students in 1 week versus providing quality feedback for 150 students in 1 week. And then, that's a lot, and it's hard. So if you can, try to stagger when things are due to give you enough time to actually fairly and provide quality feedback for your students. All right. Stories are great. People, humans, have been learning through stories for what? As long as we've been able to say words and communicate, humans have told stories. It helps us remember things. It helps humans remember things, and also learn better through the metaphor, through the entertainment. We can take in a lot of information. Also, stories help explain the unexplainable things. So, a lot of old stories, fairy tales, fables, folk tales, myths, legends, those are all very easy and have more universal morals, universal lessons, so to speak. Uh, so these are a great way to teach, good morals or life lessons, and this helps children develop empathy and sympathy for others. It's something that I'm sure you're aware of, but you may not be. Humans, people, us, we're very selfish, incredibly selfish, especially children, especially adolescents as well. It's a part of the natural growing process. Asking a middle school boy to care about you know some poor person in another city, let alone another country, let alone another continent, you will get you shouldn't be surprised by a harsh, sarcastic, demeaning response, because um, children have to empathy and sympathy are not, they seem to be skills we have to learn, and not all of us learn them at the same rate. So stories can help that, because just being told you should be nice to someone, that doesn't actually help them become a nicer person. So, characteristics of a good story. This is quite important. Uh, there's lots of stories, but there's a lot of bad stories. So, one, there's a single, clearly defined theme, or dearly defined, as it would have it. And that, what is the story about? It's about one thing. Don't try to overcomplicate it with lots of things. We don't have time in class for elementary school students to handle very complex narratives, especially with unreliable narrators or things like that. Especially when we're talking about English stories, it's just, keep it simple. It does help, though, to have a plot, a story, a well developed plot to keep things interesting. In order for students to care, there has to be something for them to care about. The third, it really helps to have it be interesting, and be able to have the stylized, vivid word pictures, pleasing sounds or strange sounds, to have it be alive, to have the story be alive. Think about, and we'll have examples as well. Think about every good story you ever heard. Was it delivered? It was delivered with enthusiasm and energy. It wasn't delivered in a flat tone. It had excitement in it. Fourth, it helps have characters and develop the characters in some way for a good story, so that the students care about them and want the characters to do well. They want the characters to win at the end, and that there's some dramatic appeal. There's some sense of danger about it. Oh, not all stories are like this, of course. There's always exceptions. Give you an example. Now, if we look just at some of these pictures here, we can see this is Dangun, grandfather Dangun, the mythological founder of Korea. Now, you know his story, but is there any drama in his story? Not that I know of. Not in the versions I've read. There's no scary things or any possibility of failure. It's just Dangun. Well, Hwangun comes down, and that's not Dangun. He marries a bear lady, and they have a baby. That baby's Dangun. All these wonderful things. And look at that one. That's cute. Now, that is cute. That's nice. Now, so not all stories follow this same pattern, but it helps out a lot, a whole lot of having these characteristics, and also try to remember that we need to keep things simple. We don't need to bring in overly complicated stories or plot lines or narrative models. Something that we as storytellers must do is we must stimulate the listeners and the watcher, the audience's senses, make them want to listen and pay attention, because stories are very easy to fall off of. So the listeners, the audience, they have to give the storyteller their undivided attention, which is a real thing, and so they can't drift off. So when we're getting ready for storytelling, we have to prepare. We can't just read a story the first time in the class with the students. It's not going to work, and the students are going to know it. So it helps that we analyze the story. We know what the story is about. We know how the story is going to end, and we know what the story means. We know the answers to all the questions we're going to ask the students. Research its background so we can. Sometimes students like asking, "What is that? Why is that? Why is he doing that?" And sometimes it's helpful to know in what context the story was made. When we talk about different examples of stories, there are lots of similar stories from different cultures, and it's nice to know the background of them. Visualizing, thinking about how to make visual aids if needed, and how to use the visual aids if they're provided. It's an important part. A lot of people can't just listen to a person's voice for too many minutes. If you've got audio, this could be sound effects, this could be background music to help set the mood, this could be you making sounds, things like that. You want to make sure that you know what you're going to do before you do it, so it can go well. And lastly, this one's important. Practice reading your story and performing your story before you actually do it. Rehearse it. It helps a lot. You don't have to memorize a story. We're not the bards of old memorizing, Homer's Odyssey. It's okay to change some things, minor things especially. But and also, it's okay to read from the book. But it's important that we are familiar enough that we don't have to read from the book carefully. That we can look back at the audience and engage with the audience. That's important. That's why it's important to at least know the first and last lines by heart, so we can engage with the audience as we're beginning and as we are ending. Story structure, I'm sure you learned this in school, but it is a real thing. Stories have beginning, a middle, an end, and falling action, is what we call it. So the introduction, the beginning, setting a stage, where is the story taking place, who are the main characters, and usually this is before the main problem is introduced. The introduction, the beginning section of the story, often is quite short. If you remember the stories of Hungbu and Nobu, the two brothers. Uh, what is the introduction part of that story? Well, two brothers and their families live in the woods. One brother, Hungbu, was not nice, and his wife was very selfish. I don't know about how the children were, and one brother, Nobu, is it Nobu or Hungbu? Hold on, I got them confused. Nobu is the bad one. Hungbu is the good one. Nobu is the Budae-jjigae guy. He's the bad guy. Sorry. This is why it's important to know the story and not get confused with the students, in front of the students. All right. So Hungbu is a good guy. He's got good things, good wife, but they're very poor. And Nobu, he's the bad brother. He's very selfish. He's tight-fisted with his money. His wife doubly so. Then we have the body. We have the conflict. What is the instigating factor in that? Well, in Hungbu and Nobu, Hungbu finds the bird, the sparrow, with the broken leg, and he cares for it, and he loves it, and he helps heal it. He takes care of the bird until it's healed, and it flies away, la 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 la, and then it brings back seeds on another day. They plant the seeds, and kind of like pumpkins grow up, gourds we call them, and they open the gourds and cha-ching, money, 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 money. And so Hungbu is rewarded for his generous and kind behavior. Nobu hears about this, and he wants some money. And this is still part of the conflict because the climax comes up. Hungbu, how does he get? How's he gonna get a bird? Bird with a broken leg? They're not around everywhere. So he catches one, breaks his leg, which is really mean, and then he heals it. Bird flies away, eventually heals, brings back seeds. The seeds grow into pumpkins or gourds, and Nobu and his wife, they open them up. And I've heard two versions, and this is something where you can change it. One, it was the Korean mountain troll, the Dokebi, comes out with a big hammer, big mallet, and just starts beating them up. Just pop, 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 for their selfishness. The other version I heard is that a bunch of crows come out and start pecking at them, like really hurting them that way. So, whichever. So the crisis there, the climax there is when Nobu gets his just desserts, his reward for his behavior. His lifetime of behavior is rewarded. But because Hungbu's he's a loving brother, we should always love our family, never give up on them. He takes in and helps his brother, who is now reformed and going to be a good and better man and make a successful chain of Budae-jjigae restaurants. Now, I cut out a lot. There's the incident with the Hungbu goes to ask his brother for some rice, and he gets smacked in the face with a rice spoon. But that's the main basic story. And as when it comes to you to tell a story, you'll have time consideration to deal with, and also the level of your students or the appropriateness of the material. Sometimes we need to change the story because what the story isn't 100% good for our audience. They'll either not like it, they're not old for it, or it's just not good enough. It's not something we want to talk about at that time. It's like what is it? Hansel and Gretel. A lot of the old German stories, kids die a lot. They die all the time in those stories. In the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So Hansel and Gretel, Pied Piper. What else is there? Oh, and Cinderella. They're slicing off parts of people's feet to make them fit into the glass slipper. It's disgusting. We don't like those parts because they're gross. We don't want to scare children anymore. So we took those parts out. If you watch the Disney movies, they took those parts out. They want the happy, romantic parts of the story. They don't like the gross, disgusting parts. They like the, the cute parts. So it might be that you'll need to change a few small things in your stories as well when time comes for you to tell a story.